have the VFR sectional pulled up here on 4Flight. 4Flight's pretty handy because you can just click it and it gives you all of your information about the airport. But if you just had a VFR sectional, you could know that Macon County is what radio calls you'll be making. Your AWOS, which is your weather, is 118.225. Your airport elevation is 2,034 feet. The little star next to the L is pilot controlled lighting. 50 is 5,000 feet runway. 123.05 is your CTAF, which is Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, which is what you will use to make your position reports. RP is right pattern for runway 25. But here on 4Flight, you have your Atlanta Center frequency, AWOS, clearance delivery, CTAF, and Unicom. Unicom is how you contact the FBO. Runway 7 and 25, asphalt, excellent condition, 5,000 by 100 feet. It gives you all the information about the airport. So the taxi diagram is something we can talk about today. The taxi diagram gives you your runway lengths and widths, your runway numbers, the actual headings of the runways, the FBO, and if you're taxiing with 4Flight on your iPad, it will show you where you're at if you have GPS on your iPad. If not, you can just study it and know where the taxiways are and how to get to the runway and from the runway. So, patterns. Patterns is a big part of VFR flying. They are basically a rectangle around the airport. Your standard pattern altitude is 1,000 feet above your airport elevation. Since Macon County's airport elevation is 2,034 feet MSL, the Macon County pattern altitude would be 3,034. We can then round that up to 3,100 because it's better to be above it than below it. So you have a couple different legs to the pattern. You have the upwind leg, left crosswind, left downwind, left base, final, as well as on the right side, right crosswind, right downwind, right base. There's a left pattern and a right pattern. So the way to know what side you're on or you're going to use is if you're sitting on runway 7, you're going to depart runway 7. If you're looking to your left, that would be left pattern. Looking to your right, it would be right pattern. Let's say you joined the downwind and you were looking over your left shoulder and you've seen the runway, you would be on the left downwind. If you were on the right downwind, the runway would be on your right shoulder. So let's act like we are departing runway 7. We're flying outbound, just departed. We would then be on the upwind leg. So I like to climb to around 800 feet above your airport elevation and then make my left crosswind turn if we're going to do left traffic. So once you're on the left crosswind, you'll level your wings for around 5 seconds. You can sweep the windshield and look for traffic or obstacles, and then you can begin the left downwind turn. Once you're on the left downwind turn, you'll stay on the downwind until the landing point is around 45 degrees off your left shoulder, or your right shoulder if you're on the right traffic. Then you can turn left base. At left base, you'll fly on the left base until you intercept a final, and you can fly straight in for runway 7. So let's talk about our airplane setup. So if we're on the left downwind, we should already have our before landing checklist complete. But once we get abeam our landing point, so today we'll talk about it being the 1,000-foot markers, which is the 2 big white stripes on the runway. We'll do our before landing checklist, or make sure it's completed, reduce the throttle to 1,700 RPMs, slow to 90 knots, and once we're in the wide arc, which is the flap operating range, put 10 degrees of flaps in, which is the first notch. We'll begin to slow down and descend. Once the landing point is 45 degrees off of our left or right shoulder, depending on if you're on left traffic or right traffic. So since we're on left traffic, 45 degrees off your left shoulder, you'll begin your left base turn. Left base, you should be at 1,700 RPMs, slow to 80 knots, and then put in 20 degrees of flaps, which is the second notch. Once we get close where we can turn to final and make a good straight entry to final, we should be at 1,700 RPMs, 70 knots, 30 degrees of flaps, which is your third notch on final approach, and then we will land. So now that we have the pattern figured out, let's talk about our radio calls. So one thing that I learned way back in flight training is this little phrase. Hey you, this is me, this is where I am, this is what I'm going to do. Hey you. You always say hey you twice, because if somebody tunes to the frequency and misses the first part of your call, they still know where you're at, because multiple airports can use the same frequencies. So I have these labeled 1, 2, 2, and 3, as well as on the runway to know where you need to make these calls. So let's start with number 1. So number 1 is sitting right there in front of the FBO. We've just started the plane, and we're going to taxi to the runway. So Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, taxiing from the FBO via whatever taxiway we're going to use. Let's say this is Alpha. Some taxiway diagrams have the taxiways listed. So you'll say whatever taxiway you're going to use via Alpha to runway. We're going to use runway 7, and then Macon County traffic again. So once we're down here, we've completed our run up and we're ready for depart. Let's say we're going to leave the airport environment to the north. We're going to go to the north. So Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, departing runway 7 for a northbound departure, Macon County traffic. And then once we get out of the airport environment, we'll say Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, is clear of the area to the north, Macon County traffic. So another scenario we could use for this too is we were going to stay in the pattern and do a couple landings. We would say Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, departing runway 7, left closed traffic or right closed traffic, wherever you're at or what traffic you want to use, Macon County traffic. And then we would depart and then start making position reports in the pattern, which is 3. 3 is listed in all different phases of the pattern. So Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, we would say left crosswind, left downwind, left base, right downwind, right crosswind, final, landing runway 7, Macon County traffic. And that is our radio calls for the pattern. So now let's talk about entering the airport environment. So I like to make my calls, my first call if I'm flying to an airport, 10 miles out. I have that listed up here. So 10 miles out, I would say Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, 10 miles to the north or wherever I am from the airport at, let's say, 3,000 feet, setting up for the 45-degree downwind entry, runway 7, Macon County traffic. So what I mean with the 45-degree downwind entry is if you are north of the airport, which is this plane here, you would join the left downwind directly off a 45-degree angle and join the downwind. This is standard pattern entry. But if you were south of the airport, you would have to overfly the airport and do a right teardrop here to join that left downwind. So you would come in, let's say, 1,000 feet above your pattern altitude, so you don't get involved with anybody in the pattern. And then once you get a mile from the airport, you can begin descent. And at 1.5 miles, you can do your right teardrop descending to the pattern altitude to join the pattern. And that's where those radio calls come from. Here we go. So here's number 2. We're south of the airport, as we talked about. Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, is, we'll say, 10 miles out because we're on the first call. At, we'll say, 4,000 feet, since we're going to overfly the airport at 1,000 feet above the pattern altitude, we're going to overfly the field at 4,000 for a right teardrop for the left downwind, runway 7, Macon County traffic. So now our third radio call is when we're overflying the field. So we're coming from the south and we're overflying the field after we've made our 10, 7, 5, and 3 radio calls. Those will all be the same as 2 and 1, depending if you're coming from the south or the north. So number 3 would be Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, is overflying midfield at 4,000 feet, setting up for a right teardrop, left downwind entry, runway 7, Macon County traffic. And number 4. So number 4 would be, where's that? Here it is. In the teardrop. When you're going to begin that right teardrop, you would say number 4. Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, is executing the right teardrop for the left downwind runway 7, Macon County traffic. And then once you get established in the pattern, you can go back to your basic calls and say we're left downwind, so you would say Macon County traffic, November 779 Papa Tango, left downwind runway 7, Macon County traffic. And you have successfully entered the pattern.